Good morning, everyone. My name is Annie Smith. I'm the Vice President of Research and Data here at NCEA. I'm so happy that you all can join us today as we look at the NAEP 2022 results for Catholic schools. I want to begin us in prayer. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. And this advent of expectation draw us together in unity, that our praise and worship might echo in these walls and also through our lives. And this advent of expectation draws us together in mission, that the hope within might be the song we sing and the melody of our lives. And this advent of expectation draws us together in service, that the path we follow might lead us from a stable to a glimpse of eternity. Amen. And I'm so happy today we are joined by Bill Ward from the National Center for Education Statistics. He is the Senior Research Scientist at the U.S. Department of Education, and he has worked for NCS for almost 15 years. He's a certified contracting officer's representative overseeing the NAEP sampling and data collection and the NAEP principals panel. He has a bachelor's in arts and experimental psychology from Southern Methodist University and a PhD in experimental psychology from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us. We also have Mike Fassbach with us. He's the Senior Study Director at Westat, which is a research organization in Rockville, Maryland. He began his work in 2011 supporting NAEP. In his current role as the NAEP Private School Coordinator, he provides outreach and support to private school organization leaders. Prior to his role at Westat, he was actually a 3rd and 4th grade teacher in Maryland, and he maintains his teaching and administrator certificate. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education from the University of Maryland, and he has a Master's of Science degree in curriculum and instruction with a specialization in administration from McDonough College. Welcome, Mike and Bill. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Annie, thank you for inviting us. Always look forward to these opportunities to present to NCEA. As Annie mentioned, I'm Bill Ward at NCS within the U.S. Department of Education. And Mike, if you want to come in and just say hello at this point, that would be good.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon to all of you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I look forward to sharing some interesting results with you today.
Thanks, Mike. So before I go into the presentation, I'd also like to thank all the Catholic schools that participated in NAEP 2022. You know, without your help, we could not be showing these findings. You know, there's some very rich findings. We only have an hour to go over this, and so we pick the highlights and also going to provide a little context. Just to want to put a plug in for NAEP 2024. Again, we need Catholic schools to participate, and you'll see what we do with these findings. They're really interesting. So thank you for letting us be here. Next slide, Mike. So here's today's agenda. I'm gonna go over an overview of NAEP, talk a little bit about the 2021 monthly school survey and the national results. And then Mike is going to talk about the results for Catholic schools. And then if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about some other key education challenges during the pandemic and time for questions. And there are going to be a couple of breaks within the transition where Mike's going to take over and then I'll take back over. So we will try to answer questions at that time. So about 2 or 3 times we'll answer questions. And anything we can't answer, you know, if it's too long or too complex, we will try to get back to you. You know, at another time. Annie has our contact information. Next slide, please. So what is NAEP? It's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Many of you know it's the largest continuing and only nationally representative assessment of what our nation's students know and can do in various subjects. Provides a common measure. First administered in 1969. And then allows comparison of public school students nationally to that of private school students and also Catholic school students. So the components, 2 main components of NAEP. There's the main NAEP, which is every 2 years we collect data from the states, the nation, and TUDA's trial urban districts. Those are like the 26 largest school districts in the United States. They get individual data, for example, New York City, Los Angeles, Miami. That's main NAEP. So when you think about NAEP, reading and math at 4th and 8th grade, plus some of other subjects. We also do long-term trend That goes back to 1971. It's still paper-based and it's national, and it's for 9, 13, and 17-year-olds. So it's a little different than Maine NAEP, which is for 4th and 8th grade, but there is a lot of overlap. And if you notice, we do report public and non-public schools for both Maine and long-term trend. And NAEP uses sampling to select schools. So we don't go to all the schools in the country. We have a sample for the nation, for the states, for the TUTA districts, also for private and Catholic schools. And NAEP assesses students in a variety of subjects. So I had mentioned reading and math, 4th and 8th grade. Those are the two big ones. But we also, just looking at these different icons, we have technology and engineering literacy, geography, economics, writing, music, the visual arts, science, civics, US history. So it's more than just math and reading, but those are the two main ones. And except for long-term trend, which is still paper-based, it's all NAEP assessments are now digitally based. So we assess students on tablets, Microsoft Surface Pro tablets with keyboards. If you see the picture, this is kind of what a NAEP assessment would look like. We bring all equipment to the school. So really what we ask schools, both public and private, is really just provide a space to assess the students, you know, and provide electricity if it's needed. You know, minimally, and obviously we would need your students for, you know, a couple of hours of testing for each session. So now I'm going to kind of turn more into results. So, you know, and a lot of the results we're going to show are during the pandemic. So this is the NAEP 2021 monthly school survey that NCES ran. So that's where I work. It's within the U.S. Department of Education. So this was an online survey. So this was February to May of 2021. So some of this is to, you know, make sure you're oriented to the time period. So this was obviously right in the middle of the pandemic when schools, different schools across the country were doing different things. And so really this is grade 4. If you see, so public, you know, if you look from February to May, 50 to 62% of the schools across the country were offering in-person, the public schools. Now, if you look at other private and Catholic, and again, with Catholic, you're up in the 90%. So that is one of the stories coming out of the pandemic. And here's 8th grade. Kind of mirrors what we found for 4th grade. So this was information from one of the monthly school surveys. And if you want more information, again, that's just a brief overview of what some of the data. You can always go here to this dashboard. IES is the Institute of Education Sciences, and you can get more data. So now let's talk about the 2022 NAEP assessment. So this was data collected from January to March of 2022. So we were in the field as of last March. So this is just a few months ago. So we had large samples, 224,000 grade 4 students, 224 grade 8 students. So this is across the country. This is public and private. NAEP is reported as average scores, percentiles, and NAEP achievement levels. There are school, teacher, and student survey questions, including questions related to learning during the pandemic. So Mike and I are going to share some of the results. Again, there is a lot of information on the NAEP Data Explorer if you want to dig more deeply into this, but these are kind of the results that we thought would be interesting for the time allotted today. So we're going to talk about math first. Next slide. So I'm going to pause on this slide for just a minute. So this is so you get the overall context of what happened to our students. So if you look at 2022, you can compare it to 1990. So we were up 23 points. But a kind of a key point to look at is 2003. So really, we're kind of back to the levels we were 20 years ago. And compared to 2019, which was the last large state level data collection, Maine NAEP, we're down 5 points. And if you look at grade 8, similar findings. Really, this is, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is kind of the key story for what happened during the pandemic with learning loss. It's really is going to be grade 8 mathematics. Not that there wasn't loss at other grades and other subjects, but you're going to see the biggest declines at grade 8 mathematics. And we will also, when I turn it over to Mike, he is going to talk about Catholic school results. So this is, again, this is the nation. So one of the things that NAEP can do is break it up by subgroups. I think it's one of the most powerful aspects of the NAEP assessment. So you can kind of see, if you look at grade 4 males, change from 2019 down 3 scale score points. And you can kind of see with grade 8 math are the largest decreases. The bottom row, Catholic schools. So you can see grade 4, no significant change from 2019. So this is, now we're starting to get into the story of Catholic schools. How did they do compared to the nation? And if you look at grade 8 math, Catholic schools from 2019 were down 6 scale score points. So really one of the things coming out of this is grade 8 math that was affected the most, and it affected all groups. Let me talk a little bit about reading. So again, I'm showing the same graphic. This is reading. If you look at grade 4, grade 8, and we'll just stop here for a second just to let you look at this. So no significant change compared to 1992. Down a little bit from 2003, but not significant, but 3 points down compared to 2019. You know, we kind of see 2019 as pre-pandemic. You know, 22 is in the where we are in the pandemic, maybe post or middle pandemic. Again, this would be as of February and March of 22. If you look at grade 8, kind of similar trends. So reading scores did decline during the pandemic. Here's the same chart for reading. So greater score declines for females compared to males, and English learners improve. And again, the bottom row, Catholic school. So if you look at Catholic school, again, the diamond indicates no significant change. So you held steady. I mean, you know, that depending on how you look at it, there wasn't in reading in grade 4 and grade 8 learning loss. You held steady. That could be seen as a good story. I mean, you know, for Catholic schools, if you compare them to the rest of the country where there was learning loss. So I'm going to end here, and you can look at a quote from the NCS commissioner, my boss at NCES. So it's clear the pandemic disruption was a major factor impeding achievement. Nationally, we experienced declines between 2019 and 2022 in both math and reading, 4th and 8th grade. But Catholic schools generally fared better than the nation. Catholic schools held steady in all but mathematics at grade 8, where they experienced declines similar to the nation as a whole. So this was a quote that Dr. Carr gave out. So I think at this point, I'm going to transition to Mike, but this may be a good time, Annie, if you have any questions that have come through. We can pause for a second.
Feel free to write your questions either in the Q&A or the chat box. And we also will hopefully have time at the end too, if you don't have any questions right now. Thanks so much, Phil.
Yeah, so let me transition to Mike. I'm going to go off video and let Mike take us to the next section.
Okay, thank you so much, Bill. I think you did a great job of setting up a foundation for us to explore the Catholic school results in greater detail. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show similar graphs for grades 4 and 8 mathematics and reading. So I'll spend a little bit more time on the first graph for each of these so that I can orient you to what we're looking at, and then it'll be a little easier to read the following graphs. So what we're looking at here are the 2022 results for Catholic schools, and Catholic schools here are shown in the blue bar and public schools are shown in the gold bar. Bill mentioned that results for NAEP are available back to the 1990s, but we thought for the purposes of today's presentation, it would be helpful to just focus on the most recent decade. So what we're looking for are asterisks, and asterisks for NAEP indicate a statistically significant difference. So Bill already shared with you changes in scale scores from 2019 to 2022. So you already have some idea of what we're expecting. So there was no significant change in Catholic school scores for grade 4 mathematics. But you do see in the gold bar for public schools, you do see where the declines are. So going back over time, we don't see significant changes in Catholic school scores for the last 10 years like we do for public schools. So looking at grade 8, we see that the lines run kind of parallel, the Catholic school bar at the top and then the public school at the bottom. But we do see some asterisks here. So we see that in 2022, there was a significant change in score for grade 8 mathematics from 2019. So what that tells us is that Catholic school students did drop in math compared to before the pandemic. Which is a similar story to what we see in public schools. But overall, you see that the needle's not moving very much over time with Catholic schools. Looking at grade 4 reading, again, we're looking for asterisks here, and we're not seeing any changes from 2019 to 2022, as we are for public schools in the gold bar. And then at grade 8, we don't see any asterisks here either, indicating that there's no significant change in score from 2019. But again, you can go back and look all the way to 2013 here and see where scores compare 2022 all the way back to 2013. So in addition to average scale scores, Bill mentioned there are other ways that NAEP reports scores for NAEP, and one of those is to report out on the NAEP achievement levels. So NAEP reports out at basic, proficient, or advanced, as well as below basic. And so we have two different tables that we can look at in more detail. And again, I'm going to spend a little bit more time reviewing this first slide here because I'm going to repeat this for the other grades and subjects. So what we're looking at in the top table is comparing Catholic and public schools in 2022. And we're looking again for asterisks here. So what we can see here is that there was a smaller percentage of Catholic school students scoring below the NAEP basic threshold compared to public schools. And there were a higher percentage of Catholic school students scoring in the NAEP proficient range compared to public schools. You'll see that the numbers are different between Catholic and public for the basic and advanced levels, but they were not a significant difference. So that's how we read the first table. And then the second table is comparing Catholic school scores in 2022 to 2019. And what we see here are there are no asterisks. So while the percentages are slightly different in each of the different columns for the different achievement levels, they're not significantly different from 2019. So we have about the same percentages of students scoring in the various achievement levels. So that's mathematics grade 4. And looking at mathematics grade 8, we do see some more asterisks this time in the top table. So we have a lower percentage of Catholic school students scoring below NAEP basic, and we have a higher percentage of Catholic school students scoring at NAEP proficient and at NAEP advanced compared to students in public schools. And again, looking at the bottom table, we see the percentages from Catholic schools in 2019, and we don't see any difference in the percentages of students at the different achievement levels. Reading grade 4, I think we could repeat this pretty similarly throughout the next two slides, but we see asterisks for below NAEP basic, proficient, and advanced, indicating a lower percentage of Catholic school students scoring below NAEP basic and a higher percentage of Catholic school students scoring at NAEP proficient or at NAEP advanced compared to students in public schools, and no changes in the percentages of Catholic school students in the achievement levels compared to 2019. And finally, for reading grade 8, the same story that I just shared for grade 4, a lower percentages of Catholic school students scoring below basic, and a higher percentage of students scoring at proficient or advanced, and no difference between Catholic schools in 2019. So another way we can look at results for Catholic schools is to look at demographic information. So what we have here for grade 4 mathematics are the scores for all students, which we've already explored in 2022 here. And we can also look at the performance of different demographic groups, including gender and race and ethnicity. On this graph, and the same graph that I've repeated for the other grades and subjects, you'll see that there are results for all students, male, female, white, Black, and Hispanic students. NAEP does provide results for Asian students, American Indian, Alaska Native students, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students, as well as students who identify as 2 or more races. But for Catholic schools in 2022, there was an insufficient sample size to be able to provide results for those particular demographic groups. So while we could report those for public schools, we were not able to for Catholic schools for 2022. So if you're interested in seeing how the nation's students performed at those different race and demographic variables, you can do that using the NAEP data tools. So what we're again looking for here are asterisks. So we see a significant difference in Catholic and public school students for the all students, and then also for male, female, white, and Hispanic students. We do not see a significant difference in the scores for Black students between Catholic and public schools at grade 4 mathematics. And at grade 8, now that we know how to read these graphs here, we see significant differences between Catholic and public school students for all of the demographic groups that we're reporting on here, with Catholic school students scoring higher than their peers in public schools within that demographic group. And similar for grade 4 reading, we have Catholic school students performing higher than their peers in public schools for all of the demographic groups that we're showing on the slide. And again, the same story for 8th grade reading as well. I'll pause just for a moment. So Bill mentioned declines in grade 8 math. We can also look at, I'm sorry, I have to cough 1 second, I'm so sorry. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold here. So we saw declines in 8th grade mathematics for Catholic school students. So we see that shown in the composite score here. We can see that Catholic school students did decline in their overall composite score. So a way to help us better understand some of the stories that might be happening in mathematics at grade 8 is to look at the different subscales of mathematics, which are also all reportable. So the different subscales for mathematics are algebra, data analysis, statistics and probability, geometry, measurement, and number properties and operations. So we are again looking for asterisks in the 2019 row. And we see that there is no significant change in the score for algebra or geometry, but we do see declines in student performance in Catholic schools in the other groups. So data analysis, statistics, and probability, we do see a decline in scores there. We also see a decline in measurement, and then also in number, properties, and operations. So we're not making any conclusions here, but for those of you that are interested in digging more into the results, this is a really interesting area to explore. What is it about those particular subscales of mathematics that we saw declines for Catholic school students, whereas we didn't for algebra and geometry? Just something possibly to consider exploring in more detail. And this is a similar graph to what we looked at before with demographic groups, but this is actually comparing Catholic school students at grade 8 mathematics to Catholic school students in 2019. So comparing the same group of students across years. So we see an asterisk for the all students. We know that at grade 8 mathematics that Catholic school students did decline in their scores. But then when we look at the different demographic groups, while we do see that Catholic schools had higher scores, what appears to be higher scores in each of the different demographic groups compared to 2022, there are no significant differences here. So the all student score is significantly different, but each of the individual demographic variables, they are not significant statistically. So I'm sure many of you in the audience today are teachers, and we thought it might be really helpful to those of you that are in the classroom or work with teachers and working with students, that you might be interested in seeing some NAEP items and better understanding what these scale scores mean. So we've reported average scale scores in many of our slides. NAEP has a tool, it's called the NAEP item maps. And what this tool does is it allows you to see items that have been mapped to a particular average scale score. So you can see what kinds of items students are likely or less likely to answer correctly based on the average scale score for that particular group. And I'm going to do a demo that will hopefully help make this a little bit easier to understand. So I'm going to share my screen. And we are looking at the NAEP item maps website, and you can get to this from the link that's in the PowerPoint, which we'll share after the presentation. There's some general information here about how to read the item map, but I'm going to walk you through that right now. So to get us started, we're going to continue with our focus on mathematics at grade 8, because that seems to be an area where we saw some changes in scores for Catholic schools. So we thought it'd be a good area to explore in more detail. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change my view just to get us started to mathematics grade 8. And I'm going to focus on the year 2022. And you'll see my table here just updated. So there's a couple of things we're gonna walk through here. The very first thing I'm going to show you is that you can see these average scale scores. These are called cut scores that are identified with the various NAEP achievement levels. So we looked at basic, proficient, and advanced in previous slides. So for grade 8 mathematics, you can see where those cut scores actually fall. So 262 would be the cut score to reach NAEP basic, 299 for proficient, etc. There's another key piece of information here. That is a table that shows you the different subscales. So what kind of item we have on this item map. And then you'll see that there are a bunch of average scale scores that are listed here, or scale scores that are listed on the left. So then we have descriptions of various items, and any item that is shown in green font with an underlined, that's an underlining, we can click on that item and actually explore that item in more detail. And that's actually what I thought we would do right now. So if you recall from the previous slides, the average scale score for Catholic school students in 8th grade mathematics was 288 in 2022. So you'll see there's actually no 288 here, but there is a 282 and a 292. So what this means is that an average student in Catholic schools would likely be able to answer this question correctly, because this has an average scale score of 282 that falls below the 288 that the average scale score for Catholic school students had, but would be less likely to answer this question correctly at 292 because it's above that average scale score of 288. So I thought we could actually look at this item here. So this is a triangle. So if I go back up to the top, this tells me it's a geometry item. And it says, use similarity to determine a dimension of a rectangle. This also tells me that it's a calculator available item and that it's a selected response. So the students don't have to construct a response here. They just have to identify their correct answer. So if I click on the item, it pops up in a new window and I can see exactly how the item appeared to students on the digitally based assessment. So here is the question. It shows the information about the two different rectangles, and then it shows you the question, what is the length of side EH, and then what the various answer choices were. So I can see the actual item. I can click on the key or scoring guide, and I can see that the correct answer is B. And then if this was a constructed response item, I could click the sample responses and I would see a few student responses that they typed into the tablets. But what's really interesting is I can click on this performance data option here and I can see nationally how students answered this question. So I can see again, the answer here, B was correct, and that 63% of students in the country answered that question correctly. And I can see what questions were distractors. Many students chose this answer incorrectly. So that might be worth exploring. Why did the students choose the answer incorrectly? And I can see 1% of students didn't answer the question. So that's a helpful way to better understand what these average scale scores mean. But there's also another tool within this NAEP item map that you can explore Catholic results a little bit more in detail. So I'm going to go back up to the top, and then there's this green box here that says student group performance. So if I click it, and then under the select student group, I'm going to hit this drop down menu, and I'm going to scroll all the way down until I get to public or non-public school. And I click that. And I'm interested in seeing more information about Catholic versus public schools for this example. So I'm going to unclick these other boxes. And then I scroll down and you can see now I've got two more identifiers here, public and Catholic. And if I scroll down, I now have a box and whisker plot of the percentiles for each of these different groups. So students in the 90th percentile in Catholic schools, the average scale score here was 334 versus the 75th percentile, the 50th percentile, the 25th percentile, and the 10th percentile. So you can see where the distribution falls for the students in Catholic schools at grade 8 mathematics compared to public school students. So their distribution looks a little bit different than Catholic schools. So if you wanted to see what kinds of questions the top performing students in Catholic schools were answering correctly, I can see here, these students are getting questions above or getting 334 and below correct, I should say. So here's another example of a question that the top performing, the 90th percentile students in Catholic schools were answering correctly. And you can just, I'm not going to go into this one in too much detail, but you can see that the question is more complex. And you can see that the performance data has a much smaller percentage of students nationally getting this answer correct. So I could spend hours going over the NAEP item maps, but I thought it'd be helpful to help contextualize what these average scale scores mean when we're looking at these data. So, and you can, this is all publicly available. So if you're interested in exploring these items for different grades and subjects, all you have to do is go to the NAEP item maps website, which I will provide again a link to in the PowerPoint, change your grade, subject, and year, and you can explore these in more detail. So before I go on to the next topic, Annie, do you have any questions that have come in from the chat?
No questions right now. But yeah, as Mike and Bill said, feel free to write them in the chat or the Q&A, and we can also, if you have longer questions, we can also follow up with you. Great.
And again, like as I promised, the link to the item maps is right here. So when you get these slides later, you can access them here. Okay, so in addition to the cognitive items that we've been looking at, so we were spending a lot of time looking at mathematics at grade 8, NAEP also administers questionnaires to students, teachers, and principals or administrators that ask about the context for learning, and we're going to look at some of these in more detail. One of the nice things about NAEP is that they collect this data and then they report it out publicly, so anybody can go explore these results and see what some of these impacts of the pandemic might look like based on how students answered questions, etc. And all of these questionnaires are available publicly. The link is right here. You can download any of the grade and subject combinations for the different groups as a PDF file, so you can read them and see what students, teachers, and school administrators answered in 2022. And then you can go explore those results using our data tools. So we wanted to provide a little flavor of what we learned in 2022. So we're going to start with an example for students. This is from the student questionnaire, mathematics at grade 8. This was part of a larger block of questions. We call those matrix questions. So the lead question here was, how much does each of the following statements describe a person like you? And then they read a few statements and then chose their answers for each of those statements. So in this case, it's how much does this statement here describe you? I want to learn as much as possible in my math class. And you can see what the choices were. Again, this is mathematics grade 8. So we have two different graphs here. So I'll spend a little time walking through what we're looking at. On the graph on the left, we're seeing the average scale scores for students based on how they answered that question. And on the right, we're looking at the percentages of students that answered the question in that way. So let's take a look at the graph on the left first. We see, looking particularly at the middle to the right side of this graph, students in Catholic schools that said that statement sounded somewhat, quite a bit, or exactly like me. Those students scored quite a bit higher than their peers in public schools who answered the question the same way. We don't see a significant difference between a little bit like me, and you'll also see that we don't have results for Catholic schools for not at all like me or missing, meaning that most students answered this question in the other categories. And then if we look at the graph on the right, we can see the percentages, how students actually answered by quantity, right? So we have the majority of Catholic school students saying that the statement that they want to learn as much as possible in math class is quite a bit like them or exactly like them. And that's significant from their peers in public schools. So what does that mean? That's up to you to go explore and understand. But to me, it means that Catholic school students appear to be motivated to learn mathematics at grade 8. So that was an example of a student questionnaire item. Now we will look at an example of a teacher questionnaire item. So in this case, it was the same kind of example where there's one lead question and then multiple questions for the teacher to answer as part of that grid. So I am satisfied with being a teacher at this school. You can see what the answer choices for the teacher were. And again, graph on the left is average scale scores of students based on how their teachers answered this question. And then on the right, we see percentages of how this question was answered. So there is some nuance with this that I do have to explain. NAEP does not report results for teachers, and it doesn't report results for principals. So what it means is that we always have to tie it back to the student. So what we're looking at here are average scale scores of students who had teachers who said, somewhat like me, quite a bit like me. It's a little nuance there, but we're not actually doing a survey of teachers or a survey of schools. We're doing a survey of students, and then we're asking their teachers and principals to answer these questions. So just a little nuance, hopefully that makes sense. And what we see here is that Catholic school students had teachers that described being satisfied with their jobs. We see Catholic school students scoring higher than their peers in public schools based on how their teachers answered that question. But when we look on the graph on the right, there's no asterisks anywhere. So while the percentages are different, they're not significantly different. So basically, teachers answered very similarly in public and Catholic schools. And then you compare that to the results that we find by average scale scores. So just an interesting finding, again, about one of the many factors that may or may not impact student learning that NAEP is able to report on through these questionnaires. And then finally, and this is the most complicated one of all, so I'll spend a little bit more time on this one. This is a question that the school principals or administrators were asked to answer. Approximately what percentage of students in your school have parents or guardians who volunteer regularly to help in the classroom or another part of the school? So you can see the answer choices here. So again, what percentage of students have parents who volunteer? And on the graph on the left, we see how schools answered this question and the average scale scores that go with that response. So what I'm looking at here is that the 11 to 25% as an example. We have principals who said that 11 to 25% of their students have parents that volunteer regularly, and those are pretty high scale scores. So that's an interesting finding there. There is a significant difference in the 0 to 10%. So meaning that Catholic schools had parents that volunteer for 0 to 10% of the students compared to 0 to 10% of the public school students. So again, this is a little bit more of a complex item because we're looking at percentages and percentages. But it's just another way to find out what kinds of things are potentially impacting student learning and achievement. And then again, on the graph on the right, you can see the percentages of responses. So the percentages of students that had principals who said these reflect the volunteering that's happening in schools. So there's many items that you can go explore in the school teacher and student questionnaires. So hopefully this whet your appetite a little bit to go dig in a little bit more. And these are the links where you can access these resources. The Nation's Report Card website and the NAEP Data Explorer. You can explore all of these results in much more detail. I'm going to stop there and see, Annie, if there are any questions before I turn it back over to Bill.
No questions. I put in the chat box the 2 links so that you can just copy them.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, Bill, I think we do have time then for you to address the next topic. So I will put my camera off and turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Great presentation. I even learned things from that. I think the item maps are really interesting and shed a light on really what's going on with our nation's students. So thanks for doing that. And and I would say that these are the things that Mike and I thought would be interesting to this group. If there are other things you would like to learn more about NAEP, we definitely can present at future meetings. So this is kind of the last segment of this that I wanted to talk about. Like Mike said, we have time. So I guess to start this is, so Commissioner Carr, when she presented these results in October, her kind of theme for presenting this was the kids are not all right. So you can see with the NAEP scores that achievement has gone down. This is some of the other information that the NCS, the National Center for Education Statistics, collects from other surveys. We do a lot of other different things. And so I wanted to kind of, with time, shed some light on that. Like, what were some other key education challenges during the pandemic? And so I'm going to talk more about these 7: enrollment, absenteeism, teacher vacancies, school shootings, classroom disruption, cyberbullying, and use of mental health services. So the first one, enrollment. And we'll just pause on each of these slides because there is a lot of information here. So K-12 enrollment declined between school year 2019 and 20 and 2021, 20 to 21. K-12 enrollment is down 3%. In some states, the decline was 4% or more. So again, this is kind of during the pandemic. And lower grade levels experienced a greater rate of decline than higher grades. So this is across the country. This is from our Common Core of Data, one of the data sets that NCS manages. So enrollment is down. Absenteeism. So student and teacher absences were up in 2021. Chronic absenteeism from students increased relative to a typical school year pre-pandemic, 72%. Teacher absences have increased relative to a typical school year pre-pandemic, 72%. Finding substitutes is more difficult than a typical school year pre-pandemic, 77%. This is what schools have reported. Teacher vacancies. So let me kind of, I'll go through the data in this slide. So you know, the top left, all public schools, you have percentages. And you can see the color coding greater than 10% for, looks like yellow or gold, the purple 5 to 10%, the blue is 0 to 5, and 0%. So out of all public schools, 56% reported 0 vacancies. 22, 0 to 5, 13%, 5 to 10, and 10% greater than 10% vacancies. So you can see that we've got all public schools, schools in high poverty neighborhoods, low poverty, and then the minority. So the key takeaways from this: more than 1 in 5 public schools reported at least 5% of their teacher positions were vacant in January 2022. Mike, just go back to that other slide for a second. I do want to point out the other one. Teacher vacancies were more prevalent in high minority schools and schools in high poverty neighborhoods. So again, going to the title of the slide, high poverty schools report greatest number of vacancies. And again, this is across the country, and this is reporting from the schools themselves. Next slide, school shootings, highest number recorded to date. So this is 2000 to 221. So you have the chart here. And if you look at 20 to 21, 43 shootings with deaths, 50 shootings with injuries only. And you kind of can see, you know, going back 20 years. Next slide. Classroom disruptions. So this is from 0910 to 1920. So within 10 years, an increase of 5% of student verbal abuse of teachers, 6.7% increased student acts of disrespect for teachers other than verbal abuse, and then 1.6% increase in widespread disorder in classrooms. So that's over this 10-year period. Cyberbullying. So again, this is a 10-year period. bullying is down 8.5%, but cyberbullying is up 8%. And number 7, the pandemic taking a toll on students' mental health. 70% increase in the percentage of students seeking mental health services. So this is from April of 2022. This is just this past April. 76% increase in staff concerns. 56% of the schools agreed they could provide mental health services to students in need. This is just examples of other data that NCS has to kind of paint a picture of what was going on during the pandemic. And as Commissioner Carr said, going back to her statement, the kids are not all right. There's a lot of things that are going on, you know, in our public schools across the country. Next slide. So I think we're going to pause here for questions. So Annie, I think that's the end of our presentation. It's 1:47. We have some time for questions if people would like to ask anything. Mike, if you want to come back on camera. I think what's the last slide, Mike? I think it's just our information.
Well,
So
thank
Annie,
you
I'll
both.
turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you both so much. I mean, as you said, I've learned something too today. It's great to see how we can utilize this data, not only what you shared, but going in and playing around with that data toolkit. And Mike, you said you could send us the slides so we can send those to all the participants. That'd be great. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, I know it's December, so I feel like it's a quiet month. But we're happy that you all were able to join us today. And we appreciate everything that you do for our schools.
And I would just like to thank you, Annie, and NCEA for the opportunity. We love talking to schools and to diocese leaders about NAEP and Catholic schools. We really are kicking up and getting ready for 2024, as Bill mentioned earlier on. And so you might be hearing from us soon.
Yeah, Annie, and I would like to mention, I mean, we understand here at NAEP that we cannot provide school level data or student level data. NAEP is not set up like this. So really the data that we can provide is to NCEA and, you know, other organizations on how Catholic schools are doing. And actually, you know, one of the other things that's going on, we've not been able to provide private school data for a long time, you know, almost 10 years, that really we've been able to provide Catholic school data. But if you look in the NAEP Data Explorer, we do not have private school data just because we don't have enough schools that participate. And partly, so Catholic schools are kind of the proxy for how private schools are doing. So, you know, like I stated, thank you for doing this, for especially all the schools. You know, we understand it's a burden. We try to make it as minimal as possible, but we know it's a burden, you know, letting us have your students for, you know, a couple of hours throughout one school day. We understand that. We try to minimize it as much as possible. We can't make it 0%. So again, thank you, you know, and there are, you know, and Annie, there are other data tools. You know, this is just what's publicly available. You know, there's restricted use data license, there's NAEP Data Explorer, and we're more than happy to help out NCEA in any way we can to make all this data that we have, you know, useful and relevant to what you're doing. So I know, you know, never hesitate to reach out to us, that we're more than happy. And, you know, thank you for letting Mike and I have this time to talk, you know, during your meeting.
Great, we appreciate it so much. So again, if you have any further questions, feel free to you can send them directly to me, and I can connect you with Mike and Bill. I'll put my email in the chat box, and we will follow up with the slides so you have those as well. Thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great Christmas.
Thank you.